Here David had a chance. He had a chance to do something that humanly would seem right. And yet it says that he only cut off a piece of his robe. And then he stopped his men from harming Saul. And one of the things that he says here about Saul is that he didn't do this because Saul was the Lord's anointed. 6 times he calls Saul by that name. And if I knew Saul at that time and what I know of Saul, I think I could think of a lot of different names for Saul than the Lord's anointed. And yet as David looked at Saul, he realized that the office was bigger than the man. And even though he had not done the ultimate and killed Saul, yet he felt guilt over what he had done to Saul. And, this is one of the favorite verses. We got a landscape that's littered with false teachers, control freaks that are out there in the religious world, and they love this verse. That's one side of the spectrum. As I came to this, this is one of the hard things for a pastor to try to deal with, because a lot of the application is used in different ways. But the flip side of that world, where we've got so much chaos that's caused by that, Paul was very specific of saying, if I or an angel preach to you a different gospel, let them be accursed. That is a high crime of treason. And that teachers will be held most accountable if they go out there and they dilute or they teach God's word, and supposedly teach God's word, but they present it as teaching God's word, and it's a whole different thing. That is a huge crime to God. But on the other side of that spectrum is, in Southern Baptist life, I think the average stay of a pastor was like 18 months at some point in my ministry. I remember seeing that. And I think it's moved up from that. And my deacon chairman in Houston came up to me and said that he had come across a statistic that most pastors leave churches based on the actions of 6 or less people in that church. And that the other extreme of that is that we often have running amok in a lot of churches, a lot of people other people are just watching as they're out of control and causing a lot of damage. And nobody is stepping forward to deal with it. The word David uses here as he stops his men? It says here he persuaded them, but it's a powerful word. He's saying, I didn't do it. And he uses the word that describes Jesus' death on the cross in Isaiah 53. That Jesus was wounded for our transgressions. The word literally means torn apart. He tore into his men. That he didn't do it, they better not do it as well.